Well, thank you, Ben, to be with us on this happy occasion. Now that Julian is on the last leg on his road to freedom, what are your thoughts about this news and what the implication it will have?
Well, obviously, I have a lot of mixed thoughts. The first is just gratitude that he is on his way home and not on his way to Virginia to face prosecution for journalism. This is not a great precedent that is set with this guilty plea, but it would be a disastrous precedent if that were ratified by federal courts in the United States. So it's not as dangerous as it would have been for journalism had he been brought to the US and actually prosecuted. I'm so happy for you, for his friends, for his family, for everyone who's been campaigning all this time. It seems like none of you have gotten off a plane in the last 10 years. And so that has to be an enormously gratifying feeling. And I'm worried because this is the first time that in a criminal guilty plea, journalism has been described as a criminal conspiracy. What he has pled to, at least as far as I can tell, is publishing national security secrets. This is a core function of investigative journalism. This is what we need journalists to do, to shine a light on the dark corners of the powerful. I do think that today journalism is marginally less safe than it was yesterday.
That's a very serious sort of residue, and yes, you're right. I mean, the lawyers tell us that this is not a legal precedent per se, because it's a plea, but still informal one. So you worry about the cooling effect this will have.
For sure. Look, there are different kinds of precedents. This isn't a precedent that can be cited in a court case, but this does certainly invite future administrations to use this tactic to silence dissenting journalists. And as we discussed in one of our recent conversations, Kristen, my worry is not that tomorrow journalists will be rounded up and arrested. My worry is that the lawyers who represent news organizations tomorrow will start giving very different advice, just at a time in the history of our planet when we need more brave, bold, dissident journalism, not less. And so, look, I think this administration has said all along, we're not setting a precedent. This does not apply to mainstream journalists. This is a sui generis. This is just about Julian Assange. But of course, even if they're sincere in that assurance, which sounds hollow to me, they have no control over the next Department of Justice, as we saw, because the Obama Department of Justice decided not to bring this case, and the Trump Department of Justice brought it in his first year in office. And so, yes, I do think that we have cause for concern that a door has been opened. And I think that that's true globally as well, that we have now legitimized this practice of targeting foreign journalists and publishers for publishing one country's secrets. So it's really up to us to make sure that this is a one-off and isn't the beginning of something darker and more ominous.
In the past, we've seen, of course, authoritarian regimes citing Julian's example to justify their horrible actions against journalists in their own countries. That will surely linger on, since this is not a final clean solution where the indictment is simply dropped. Can that be amended with Julian getting basically pardoned by the next president, for example?
Well, I don't know, because we're not talking again about formal precedent. We're talking about, again, whether a tactic has been legitimized, has been made more credible. And so, look, I would like to have this guilty conviction cleared, and any president who would do that would get my praise for doing it. But, as you know, my organization and many other press freedom and human rights organizations, we're hoping for a different outcome, the outcome that you were hoping for, which is that this case would be dropped. And after 5 years in Belmarsh, it could have been dropped. And so I don't want to praise the Department of Justice here. Again, I don't want to underestimate how much worse the precedent would have been, not just for Assange, but for press freedom if he had ended up in a federal jail cell in Alexandria, Virginia. But as I said at the beginning of this conversation, I do think that there is a cloud that lingers from this resolution.
I had a chance to glance through the actual plea agreement, the actual document, which was made public after it was entered into the court records in the Northern Mariana Islands. And a couple of things struck me. Of course, and the one thing is known. Of course, there's no mention of violation on the basis of computer intrusion. So. No hacking, in essence. It was the biggest. It was one of the biggest sort of talking points coming out from the administration. There was the allegation of hacking. He's not a journalist; he's a hacker. So in this plea, there's no mention of that. It's just it's gone completely.
Well, yeah, I mean that is interesting. I always thought that charge was both factually and legally incredibly weak, and I think that they included that precisely so that they could preserve the talking point that this was not about journalism. At the end of the day, it may not matter so much which of the 17 or 18 charges he pled to and which ones he didn't. In some ways, I would have rather seen a plea under the computer intrusion charge because it probably would have had less precedential effect on other investigative journalism. But it is going out with a whimper that the government that has, called him a hacker all these decades, has not managed to secure any conviction under that theory.
Yeah, and on top of that, I mean, in the restitution chapter of the plea, there is actually not there is an admittance that there has been no case of any harm to any individual as a result of this. These publications that are underlying this plea. Therefore, there is no base to request restitution in the plea. So that's no harm. It's an admittance. No hacking, no harm.
Well, as I know you did, I followed the Chelsea Manning prosecution closely, and the government had an opportunity at her sentencing to present evidence of harm from these disclosures, and it didn't succeed in doing that then. So it's not a big surprise to me that in the intervening decade, they haven't, managed to contrive some of that evidence. Anybody who's followed this closely has known that there wasn't harm to individuals from this reporting, but I hope that this detail from this guilty plea gets widely circulated so that the world that has not followed this closely can see that as well.
What will organizations like the one you represent do in the aftermath of this with these residues or this precedent that is sort of lingering out there? What can you do?
I think the bigger question is for news organizations. And the question for news organizations is, how are they going to interpret this development? Are they going to view this as a threat? Are they going to try to ignore this and see what happens? And I do think that it may depend very much on who is in office, right? So, certainly I think there's been a consistency to the statements that you've seen from the press freedom groups, which is gratitude that Julian is on his way home, but also, again, concern about even the kind of precedent that is established through a guilty plea. So, we will, of course, have to stay vigilant. But, in the event that Trump is our president again, at the beginning of next year, we're going to have both a need for more leaks, because we can expect there to be a fair number of abuses, and very likely an attorney general who is fairly aggressive at trying to go after leakers and now possibly publishers as well. So again, my hope is that our legal system somewhat collectively tries to decide that this is an exception, and this is not the new normal for how we deal with these kinds of publications. But Kristen, time will tell.
Time will certainly tell. But you mentioned politics, and that may well have played into this outcome that there is an election coming up. One doesn't know. What is your impression of the reaction to this news in political circles? Is it along the polarized lines, or is it more confused?
I don't know. I haven't seen very much. I've seen some predictable bleedings from national security right-wingers about how he put our troops in danger and he should have been prosecuted with the full force of the law. But it's been pretty low energy, I think, those comments. Look, the reality is, if you understand how these prosecutions work, 5 years is a long sentence, even for a leaker. I mean, when Reality Winner was sentenced to 5 years, this was the longest sentence given under the modern use of the Espionage Act. Julian's being sentenced to 62 months. That's now the longest. So maybe they wanted to get past that 60-month mark so that they could say, this is the longest sentence served under the Espionage Act in modern American history. So I do think that takes some of the venom out of the sort of predictable responses. I mean, we will see all the retired security heads go on to the Sunday shows and take their potshots at Julian and really take their potshots at investigative journalism. But I suspect this will have a very muted political impact, precisely because he served so much time in prison already.
So Biden will neither benefit nor be harmed by this, in your opinion?
Well, right. I mean, I think the much more unpredictable question is, how would it have affected the election if Julian had been on a plane and had been in Virginia and we'd had the entire spectacle of pretrial proceedings in this case with the global reaction that we would have seen. So it may be that Biden prevented something that would have been a huge political headache for him, but I don't think he's going to reap benefits or take too many hits here. But we'll see. I mean, I think there's a presidential debate, and we'll see if this becomes an issue there.
That would be interesting. You mentioned that there is a need for the WikiLeaks ideals and the operation that it represents in the case that that Trump becomes president. And we are seeing a world where right-wing forces are growing in the strength in many countries all over the world. We are also see the world where respect for the lives and the liberty of journalists and their work in general is getting lower all over. So I shouldn't be. I mean, I know the answer to it, but I want to ask you. So you see a role for the WikiLeaks and WikiLeaks ideal in the future?
I think that we have seen consolidation of power among powerful government and corporate interests over the last generation. That the globalization and financialization and automation and the whole ideology of national security have produced a world where fewer and fewer people are making decisions that have grave impacts on all of us. And it seems to me that our democratic systems of checks and balances have largely failed in the face of this challenge. We've not seen parliaments or Congress or the judiciary really challenge that kind of hegemony that our executive branches have had, even in democratic societies. And this is where journalism has to fill that gap, and adversarial journalism has to fill that gap. And WikiLeaks has been an inspiring model of adversarial journalism and publishing for a lot of people. And in fact, you could say that its model has already won, where so many more mainstream respected publications have secure drop on their websites that allow submissions in the same way that WikiLeaks innovated. And so, yes, I think the need for publishing entities that are not beholden to the interests that they're covering has never been greater.
So we need more intelligence agencies for the people, of the people, and probably more curious eyes that do not run dry to cite some of the examples that are presented in a very negative way in the plea deal and indeed in the indictment.
Yeah, no, that's right. And look, I do think that the people who most courageously do this kind of work, the journalists themselves, are not going to be chilled by what happened here. They're going to be defiant, and they're going to do the work they need to do. As I said, my concern is whether the institutions that they work for might be somewhat chilled. And there's still a value in having this important work done by more trusted institutions and not just by advocacy entities. And so, I will be curious and very concerned to see how this plays out.
Indeed. Thank you so much for being on this stream with us on a happy occasion.
I just want to say again, just congratulations to you to reach this point in the journey, because I know how much of your life has been devoted to making this happen. So
thank you so much. Thanks for being with us.
Yep.
You too.
Bye-bye.